Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's now 6 p.m, so we will make a start. Can I take this opportunity to welcome everybody to this evening's Planning Application Committee meeting? I'm going to move straight on to the evacuation procedure so we can sort of make a prompt start. So, no, a fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Virgin Money building, formerly the Yorkshire Bank, on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future publication on the Council's website. Please can I ask that you turn your mobile phone or ensure that at least it is turned to silent for the duration of the meeting. I have one further announcement. So you may have noticed that the chair that is normally occupied by our legal officer is vacant tonight. Our legal officer is joining us online, so this is something that the council is trialling through this meeting, so they will be observing, and if you hear a voice coming out of the ether, then that will be our legal officer, sort of who will have a comment that she wishes to make. Equally, I can sort of raise comments through Victoria if I have a question for the legal officer. So we are being legally represented, but it's just being done remotely as part of the trial. Item 2, apologies. I have 2 apologies in front of me. First one is from Councillor Markham, who's being substituted by Councillor Walsh. And the second is Councillor Green, who is being substituted by Councillor Harbison. So I'd like to thank both Councillors Walsh and Harbison for joining us this evening. Are there any other apologies? No. Okay, that brings us on to agenda item number 3, which are the minutes from the 24th of May 2022. Hopefully you've all had the chance to have a look at them. Can I have somebody, if everyone's happy, can I have somebody to propose those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Hartshorn. And a seconder, thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Okay, do I have any dissent? No, okay, in that case I shall sign those minutes. Okay, item number 4, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations which are not included on the schedule? Okay, that's no. And do I have any declarations of contact on any of the 2 agenda items? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the Bedworth Physical Activity Hub, as leader of the council, I have had a briefing with the architects. However, I did give my customary warning that I am a member of the Planning Committee, and I gave no indication as to how I intend to vote.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. And Councillor Smith.
Yes, similar for me, the same item. Obviously, as a Cabinet member, I've attended several briefings over the period, but have never given an indication how I'll vote.
Okay, thank you both. Any other members? No? Okay, in that case, we'll go over to Darren, who will be presenting tonight for us. So if you'd like to start with our first agenda item.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just wait for the system to kick in. Oh. There we go. Bear with. There we go. Thanks. Sorry about that. This item is a planning application for the erection of a new physical activity hub consisting of a 25-metre, 8-lane main pool, learner pool, 4-court sports hall, fitness suite and associated changing and supporting spaces, a car park and landscaping scheme to surround the park with terrace, seating areas, paths and activity spaces, with the existing leisure centre to be demolished. The application is being reported to committee since it is a major application on council-owned land. The key issues to consider in the determination of this planning application are the principle of the development, visual amenity and landscape character, residential amenity, highway safety, flood risk and drainage, contamination and land stability, air quality, ecology and biodiversity, sustainable construction, and any relevant planning obligations. In regard to the principle of the development, the MPPF establishes the need for the planning system to achieve sustainable development. The Borough Plan also sets out policies which help to shape development. The site is within Bedworth, which has a secondary role in leisure provision within the borough, and therefore this is in line with Policy DS2, which sets out this hierarchy of centres. Policy DS3 seeks for new development to be sustainable and of high quality. It is considered that this development will have a positive impact on Bedworth and the borough as a whole. Policy HS4 sets out that the loss of community facilities will only be allowed where suitable replacement is to take place. In this case, the loss of the old leisure centre will come as a direct result of the redevelopment of the site and the new physical activity hub, which represents a significant upgrade on the facilities. Policy HS6 promotes development, which assists in creating a healthy borough through the use of sports, leisure and recreation. Obviously, this development will greatly benefit the provision of healthy sport and leisure in the borough. And while there are some losses as a result of it, it is considered that the additional benefits far outweigh the losses. Sport England and Swim England are both supportive of the scheme. MBBC Parks are also fully in support of the proposal. Overall, it is considered that the principle of the development is acceptable. In regard to the impact on visual amenity and landscape character, the Borough Plan Policy NE5 relates to the impact on landscape setting. A landscape and visual impact assessment was submitted with the scheme, which assessed the proposal's contribution to landscape character and any enhancements which are proposed. There is a small loss of some category B and C trees as a result of the development and some open land due to the increased size of the facility. However, there will be an addition of 54 new primary specimen trees, 61 new secondary, and 35 new woodland thicket trees in groups. It is considered that the proposals would lead to a significant overall enhancement. Policy BE3 of the Borough Plan states that all development must contribute to local distinctiveness and character, which it is considered this proposal does. In regard to the impact on residential amenity, a noise assessment was submitted with the application. Environmental Health have accepted this and requested a condition relating to an acoustic barrier and the hours of use for the pitch, and one relating to the windows and doors on the gym. The nearest residential properties are along Coventry Road, with a minimum separation distance of approximately 56 metres, which complies with the distance standards contained within the design guide. Overall, it is considered that the impact on residential amenity as a result of the proposal is acceptable. In regard to the impact on highway safety, it is proposed to use the existing signal-controlled access from Coventry Road. At the time of preparing the agenda, the County Council Highways Authority still had an outstanding objection. This has now been removed, however. They have requested conditions and a planning obligation of £1,500 towards validation of the existing traffic signalisation, which has all been agreed by the applicant. The Transport Demand Matters SPD requires one space per 22 metres squared of indoor space for this type of use, which would mean that there is a requirement of 173 spaces. This application provides 158 spaces, which is considered acceptable, particularly taking into account the level of parking provision would increase from the existing 104 spaces on the existing site, but also the location of the site in close proximity to Bedworth Town Centre and the other sustainable transport options. A new cycle hub is also proposed alongside outdoor cycle parking spaces. A travel plan has also been produced to encourage more sustainable forms of transport. The impact on highway safety is therefore considered to be acceptable. In regard to the impact on surface water flood risk, the Warwickshire County Council flood risk team were consulted and have no objection to the scheme, subject to a condition. It is proposed to mitigate surface water runoff by allowing water to be discharged into the surface water sewer at the equivalent greenfield rate. The impact on flood risk is considered acceptable. In regard to any potential contaminated land and land stability issues, the Borough Plan and the MPPF are both clear in that they seek decisions to make sure that sites are safe and suitable. Environmental Health had no objection, subject to the imposition of a standard contaminated land condition. Additionally, the Coal Authority have no objection to the site being used after a coal mining risk assessment was submitted. Overall, this issue is considered acceptable too. In regard to the impact on air quality, the MPPF states that planning policies and decisions should sustain and contribute towards compliance with relevant limit values or national objectives for pollutants. An air quality assessment was submitted with the scheme. This has been considered by Environmental Health, who have requested some conditions. Both the Transport Demand Matters SPD and the Air Quality SPD require the provision of electric vehicle charging points. A travel plan has been submitted, and with the application, and electric vehicle charging points have been provided in line with the Air Quality SPD. In regard to ecology and biodiversity, the MPPF outlines the need to minimise the impact of proposed developments on biodiversity. The ecological assessment outlines that the site is located within the Miners Welfare Park eco-site, which is identified as a recreational park with amenity grassland, mixed woodland, scrub and tall herb communities. The southern part of the site is within the Mineral Railway Potential Local Wildlife Site. The biodiversity figures show a net gain in biodiversity across the site, which again is considered acceptable. Policy BE3 requires major non-domestic proposals to meet with the BREEAM Very Good standard for new construction projects in order to achieve sustainable construction. The proposals are en route to a very good rating with a 61.5% score in comparison to the minimum 55% score required to achieve that rating. The building will include, for example, high efficiency condensing boilers, air source heat pumps, natural ventilation, ventilation heat recovery systems and high efficiency lighting. There has now been a request for a planning obligation, which was for £1,500, made by Warwickshire County Council for the validation of the existing traffic signal junction. This has been agreed by the applicant. The recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Darren, for the presentation. I now have a number of people who wish to speak on this matter. So I'm going to start off with Councillor Markham, who's going to be sort of speaking as ward councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Is that working? Okay, so as a ward member for the Miners Welfare Park, I fully support this application. When built, it will replace a very tired leisure centre in Bedworth and will provide both indoor and outdoor activities that are much needed and improved within the borough. This application forms part of the overall leisure strategy in which Phase 1 has already been completed with the mountain bike trails, which as of last week had 27,000 users since opening earlier this year. To get this development underway, there has been a £14.95 million grant from the Government Levelling Up Fund, and subject to the formal agreement being signed, £2 million from Sports England towards the cost of this new activity hub. I feel this will be an asset to the borough and can only enhance the activities of...
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got less of an objection now. The Highway Authority objection has been overcome. When this paperwork came out, there was no conditions about travelling to the site, which was appalling. And it's really sad that we had this condition changed effectively the 2 days before the meeting. Those conditions are really important because it's a very, very busy area, that bit of road going out of Bedworth towards Coventry. And it's really important that we don't have pedestrians and cyclists getting killed. And having conditions saying a travel plan and providing these decent routes through the park is really, really important. But when you've got the old facility still operating and the new facility being built, we need as many people to come by bus and cycle, etc., and have them a safe route into the existing leisure centre. So travel planning is really, really important, and the HGV routing is really important. So I will be watching that. But one thing that really does disappoint me, this could be the greenest leisure centre in the country, but we've chosen to have gas boilers still. We made this mistake at the Pingles of having gas boilers that were then upgraded to CHP later. We've got air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps, whatever, doing all the pool water, yet we've bought gas boilers in just to do the space heating. And I think that's a really sad thing that we've made this backward step on what would be one of the greenest leisure centres in the country. So I hope that we've still got time to look at that and how we back out of that. And I'm really keen that we have a good travel plan working. And the Pingles is not on a decent bus route. So this leisure centre will actually be more convenient for a lot of people living in parts of Nuneaton as well, on the 48 bus route and the 20 bus route. So I hope we really do the travel planning, particularly like family tickets to swim and get the bus, so we can actually really get this as a source, a destination that people can use. But I say I am still objecting on the gas boiler issue, because I think that is just such a stupid thing to do into state-of-the-art leisure centre, particularly when we've got the Russians invading Ukraine, and we know we need to get off from using gas boilers, and the technology is all there. Yeah, we should really be going zero carbon on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condicore. I now have Kevin Hollis on behalf of the applicant, Nuneaton Bedworth Borough Council. Do you still wish to speak, or?
No, thank you, Chair. I thought I'd pass that message on, but both the applicant and the agent don't wish to say anything further to the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I had you down as maybes on the list, so I thought I will ask anyway. Okay, we have no other speakers then, if the applicant or the agent don't wish to speak. So we have a motion in front of us tonight to recommend to grant planning permission subject to the legal agreement and the conditions printed. Do I have a proposer for that? Councillor Wilson, and seconder, Councillor Smith. Thank you. So I shall now open it up to any members for debate. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, when I first saw the design for the new, I want to say leisure centre, I know it's technically the physical activity hub, but those of us who have been around here long enough and have used it will still call it the leisure centre, no matter what the council determines it's going to brand it as. I did wince a bit, I must admit, because of the black rendering on the right-hand side of the drawing. When you first see it in black and white in the agenda, which obviously I saw some time ago as a portfolio holder, and my concern, which was very difficult to overcome actually until we had the renderings by the artist, was that actually that stark black rendering would actually look quite onerous and forbidding in a wide open space. But actually, having seen the artist's impression of what that would look like, which is a more realistic impression than a planning architect's drawing, I'm more than happy with how that will look now on there. That was my main reservation about that, because obviously this is going to be a big building in a very open location across a substantial piece of land which will be seen for quite some distance. So I think it's important that we do get it right. But my main fear on that has been allayed. I'm quite intrigued by the left-hand side rendering as well, because my understanding is that that is a hat tip to Bedworth's old silk and ribbon weaving past, and that will be built in there. I'm not quite sure whether the final design has been determined, but there were multiple designs about which different weaves could possibly be used. But I think that is something which is a nice nod to Bedworth's past, and I know that Bedworth is very proud of its heritage, and you can still see that in some of the houses down, is it King Street from memory, where they used to have them up, and the Huguenots, when they came over back in late 17th, early 18th century, that's where they went in Bedworth, so I'm quite pleased with that. But I think this is a game-changing application for the council and for the residents of Bedworth, Chair, because we shouldn't make any bones about it. If we didn't have this application before us, Bedworth would be going without a leisure centre, because come 2025, if not sooner, we would have to decommission the existing leisure centre. It is probably, it's just about on the borderline of being fit for purpose. It has seen better days, and we know that there are parts where, if we aren't careful, it could actually end up being dangerous to residents of Bedworth and the surrounding areas. And we do know that bits have had a tendency to fall off in the past, causing some issues. So I think this is a great way of levelling up Bedworth, and the sooner we make a start, the better, because we need to make sure that we get on with this, Chair, because if we don't, we are in danger of losing the money from central government. And if we do that, Bedworth does not have a leisure centre. There is no way around avoiding that, Chair. There was no funding for it when we took control of the council back in May 21. We have now secured that funding through the Luff bid, and I would again congratulate officers for all their hard work, working with the architects on that. And the planners have quite clearly come to an independent conclusion that it is acceptable in planning terms. So I think in terms of both policy and in terms of planning, it ticks all the boxes, so we should approve it tonight, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Just a couple of little small points I've picked up on. It's only detailed, to be fair, and I think drastic. One is the working hours of the construction, 7:30 a.m. till 7 p.m. potentially on the contract here, I see. We've got development work happening down Coventry Road, or Nuneaton Road, I should say, behind the public house down there, and they're starting at 8 o'clock and they're still moaning from anything prior 8 o'clock. Residents are moaning about that. So we've got listed here 7:30 morning till 7 at night. That's quite a long working day for heavy duty construction, considering the locality of residential properties in that area. That's one thing I question. There was an objection from a resident in the area, again Coventry Road, regarding the all-weather pitch and the lighting and light pollution. Now they're saying currently at the moment that obviously the light pollution, the noise is already there, and they're suggesting this would be worse. So again, something we need to look at. It was mentioned here about electrical charging points within the car park. Now I've been on the working group regarding to the renewal of the leisure contract, and one of the things we picked up on was about electrical charging and the opportunity, because Coventry Road there's very little parking for the residents, whether or not we can incorporate more electrical vehicle charging points and charge people from Coventry Road to have a permit, for example, because they've got nowhere to park to charge. Obviously they're parking on the road. So it might be an opportunity for a fundraiser or a money generating exercise to allow them to, we'll say, lease or whatever you like to call it, have permits within there as an opportunity as a fundraiser. And the other thing about the verification of the Warwickshire County Council, what does that actually mean, may I ask, regarding the money they're supplying for the verification of the traffic system? I know there's a few questions there, but please, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Walsh. I'll go to Darren and see how many of those you can actually
Thanks,
answer.
Chair. So in terms, I've written down some notes here. The noise nuisance one at the start, realistically, although the construction hours are set out by a planning condition, that doesn't preclude or remove any sort of responsibilities in terms of noise nuisance. The council environmental health team still have statutory powers to take care of noise nuisances where they occur, and a planning condition wouldn't remove that. So just because we've given maximum hours here doesn't mean that they can just go crazy in those hours. It has to be still within the bounds of what's reasonable. In terms of light pollution, it's a similar thing. We've had this verified by our environmental health team and they're happy. And again, that light spill is a nuisance that environmental health can take care of if it gets to that level. In terms of the car charging points, it probably isn't part of this planning application to discuss that. It's something that the separate parts of the council might look into, but it's not something that we can control by condition or through the planning application. In terms of the Section 106 monies that have been requested, it is for verification of the signalised junction. So essentially what they want to ensure is that the existing signalised junction is up to the task of dealing with this future site and the busyness of Coventry Road going forward. Highways are essentially content with the scheme, but they, instead of paying for that verification themselves, they've asked for the developer to pay it, and it's been agreed. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have any, sorry, does that answer your questions, Councillor Walsh? Or, yeah, go for it.
With regards again to the, it's a single in and out point, obviously, isn't it? Single entry point. At the moment, it's one lane in and one lane out, isn't it? Controlled by traffic lights. Okay, so because looking at if you look at that, the actual entrance is very wide. We've got a lot of grass verge. Is it not possible to make it, for example, certainly on the out way, or in whichever, a two-way system, i.e. a left turn and a right turn, two separate lanes, make it a 3-lane with two going out, one on left and one right? Would that then be better for traffic flow?
I think obviously we're in a slightly unusual position in that this is a council application. But I have to come at it from a planning point of view and assess it as though it's the same as I would, a Persimmon Homes or any other developer. So we have to assess what's being put in front of us, and this scheme is acceptable. Highways haven't requested there to be changes to the access, so that's as much as I can get involved with that. Again, it's a strange situation because it's the council that are developing it rather than a third-party developer. But certainly at this stage, my input is that the application is acceptable in highway safety terms. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Walsh? Do I have any other members? Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the development, but I do have a similar concern to Councillor Walsh in terms of the times. I mean, 7:30. I've got a development that started on the Griff that's supposed to start at 8, starts at 7:30, and the noise is horrendous. So I think 7:30 is a little early, and I don't know whether we could look at that time to move it to 8 o'clock and look at the evening times. I mean, 7 till 7:30 at night is rather a long time for those residents living there with constant noise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
Thanks, Chair. It's a similar point, really. These hours have been verified by our environmental health team, and they're content with that. If things do get to a stage where it's becoming a noise nuisance, then they have environmental health have statutory powers to take care of that at the time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd, no? Do I have any other members who wish to speak on this matter? No? Okay, in that case, we will go to the vote. All those in favour of the application? Okay. Against? Abstentions? No? So that is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, Darren, if you'd like to, when you're ready, get us on to the next item.
Just wait till people file out just to get rid of the noise a bit. Thanks. Cheers. Thanks, Chair. This application is for a modification and discharge of a Section 106 agreement under the previous permission TP 036004, which is an old reference number that we used to use, for the removal of all Section 106 contributions and affordable housing contributions. The previous permission was for 6 houses and 19 flats, granted in 2004, on the former Labour Club at Chapel Street in Bedworth. There's a single key issue here, and it's the viability of the scheme. So that's what we need to assess in terms of the assessment of this planning application. A viability assessment was submitted as part of the planning application, which was prepared by the applicant to attempt to demonstrate that the scheme would not be viable if the previously agreed obligations were required. Both national guidance in the MPPF and local policy in the form of the Borough Plan allow for viability cases to be made. They both also allow developments where there is a clear evidence to state that development will be unviable to reduce or completely remove the requirements for planning obligations. The original Section 106 was signed to include contributions for education, libraries, public transport and play and open space, and for 6 units of affordable housing. The Land and Property team have carried out an evaluation on the viability assessment submitted, and they have stated that they agree that the scheme would not be viable with the contributions. Warwickshire County Council Infrastructure team also carried out an independent evaluation of the viability assessment and agreed that the scheme would not be viable, although regrettable. The recommendation is therefore one of approval. This would essentially discharge the applicant from the previous provisions of the signed legal agreement. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I have one public speaker, obviously that's Councillor Condicle, who I believe wishes to speak as an objector.
Thank you very much. I think one of the key words in the presentation there was reduce, because effectively they're reducing the Section 106 and affordable housing to 0, which seems quite a large step when house prices are rising at 10% a year, and developers typically make 20% profit. So I'm aghast that they can't make any contribution. And from what we know about school places, Bedworth isn't actually particularly hard up at the moment for school places. the library contribution isn't necessarily going to mean we get or don't get a library, but the affordable housing is really important to Bedworth, as it is to Nuneaton. And so I'm shocked that we're going to allow them to go from 6 affordable housing units to 0. I think they would have the option of putting a new application in to develop it slightly differently. They can wait till the housing market's better, or they could have effectively take less profit and provide a smaller number. But in saying it's not viable to suddenly lose all 6 affordable housing units seems incredible. And what we don't know from the viability assessment is how much in that viability assessment they're putting for the alleged value of the land and also the profit margin, because usually these viabilities are done at 15% profit margin or something like that. And of course, if it doesn't get developed, it's worth nothing and they make no money. So that if they only make 12% profit or 10% profit, it's better than them doing nothing with the site. So I really do think the council needs to be tough on them over this and actually look at the reducing contribution options, or actually just invite them to make a new planning application for something that does work on the site and is viable. Because obviously this is an incredibly old application. I've cycled past this site many times over the last 25 years. I don't know when the original application was in, but this is mind-bogglingly out of date. And I think maybe if you turn it down today and say, we're not going to give you a free rein, put a new application in or come back with a halfway house offer, I'm sure something would happen. And I say, with rising house price at 10% a year, I cannot see how something isn't viable on this site when it's actually really well placed for public transport, the school just across the road from it and things. Yeah, we need to develop this site, but we shouldn't let developers, or actually I think the mortgage company, shortchange us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Condacor. So we have a recommendation in front of us, councillors, to discharge the Section 106 agreement to allow the applicant to not comply with it, which I know sounds a little bit unusual, but that's the recommendation in front of us. So to enable debate, do I have a proposer for this motion? Okay, Councillor Hartsford, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Okay, so I shall open the floor for debate. So, Councillor Cape.
It's one of clarification, really, because I've read this and gone over it several times. The first question is how you determine viability, because although we are advised that it's not viable, I don't know how I can base a decision on that because I can't see the figures. Secondly, the next question was that I noticed that the plan was originally for 9 houses and that when the financiers took it over, 10 had been built. So where's the extra one come from? And if that is an extra house that has been built, but they've decided that they can't build the rest of the social housing, why can't that be given over as social housing? So they can have 9 and give 1 as social housing. And the final point, I've kind of lost myself a little bit on it. It was that one, 9 agreed and 10 built. I think that's it.
Thank you, Councillor. Darren, I don't know if you've got any comebacks.
In terms of viability, I don't claim to be a viability expert. We consult with viability experts. They've assessed the relevant document and we take their advice. It's similar to highways or flood risk or any other sort of expertise, technical point. We don't have that expertise as planners. We consult out for it and we take the advice of an expert, and that's what we've done on this occasion to form our recommendation. In terms of the 9 approved and 10 built, I'm a bit confused. I'm not really sure what's that referring to.
Yeah, just to go on, this is why the whole thing is slightly confusing for me. At the bottom of the first page on it, 037529, it says erection of 9 dwellings. And it also then said that they were going to build 9, I think, and 6 affordable houses. And then on page 39, it says plots 1 to 10 were built, which indicate that 10 dwellings have been built. And so I'm just trying to get my head round what's actually been built, what was agreed to be built, and where the differentiation lies.
I'm afraid you've lost me again, Councillor. So, as far as the list here of the history is what's been there on the site. So, the erection of 9 houses and 19 flats was refused in 2004. The erection of 27 dwellings was refused in 2001. The only extant permission on there is the 6 houses and 9 flats, which I believe has been implemented because it was begun.
That's why I went from the other way down. So I went to the first one, it said 9 dwellings, and then there's 6 houses and 9 flats at 04418. It's actually, for an idiot like me, it's very difficult to follow. How many houses have been built or not?
The permission that's extant is for six houses and 9 flats. I don't believe any have actually been fully constructed on the site. I may be wrong, but I believe the site's still not finished.
Okay, Councillor Walsh, I see you indicating that you wish to speak.
So looking at the site when it was demolished originally, there was a block of flats built on the site, or part of the site. They're already built, correct, yes. So that's all flats, isn't it? Yeah. So we're talking now about the lower portion of the ground, I'm assuming, because the ground falls away and there's quite a big area there. So are we talking now, this is the application for that part? It doesn't incorporate the original build. Is that correct?
The site, as we see it here, is the red line for the site that it refers to. I'm not sure whether any of that site's actually being built, so I think it must be separate to the other one. I haven't got any details here of anything that's been completed, so I think it must refer to a separate site.
That's fine, I don't mind looking at Councillor Cape. I should look at him all night long if I have to. Was there, any further points, Councillor Walsh, that you wish to make?
Sorry. I may be wrong, and Councillor Hammersley will correct me if I am. Looking at the outline red line, which is the plot size, okay, bottom left-hand corner is where the current flats are already built. Am I correct, Councillor Hammersley? Because you've got
bottom right.
Bottom left is where the flats are already in construction. Because below the horizontal line at the bottom is a crossroad where Julie Bromwich is, correct? And where the cross is the old meeting hall, effectively.
The top.
Yeah, or the one that's on the left-hand side, roughly speaking.
Over the road.
Yeah, over the road.
Yeah.
So there's already buildings there, which is the flats.
Correct.
That were built years ago.
Correct.
So the only bit that's vacant on that plot of land at the moment is the top right-hand corner.
Yeah, if they're constructed and lived in, then it's too late for them. They would have had to pay their Section 106 years ago. So it's a non-occupation charge. So I assume that part of the site was required to pay their Section 106 at that time. So it only refers to the site that the parts that aren't lived in. On occupation is when you pay a Section 106 fee. So it's just for the rest of the development.
Okay, Councillor Hartsall.
Yeah, would we be able to check whether that 106 money has been paid yet for the flats that have been built already? Because I think if they're trying to include that part of the money in this modification, we need to know. Because if it's already been built, they should realistically have paid it. And if they're trying to get out of paying that, then that's a whole different question, I think.
I haven't got information available at the moment. We can check on that. I think we're getting a little bit sidetracked though, because the actual point of this application is to assess the viability of the scheme, and the expert's opinion is that it's unviable, and that's what we're here to debate, not previously paid Section 106s. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, we're assessing what they want to build without paying 106 money. That's the gist of what we're asking. So it's how we can assess why they should not have to pay. If they're telling us they can't afford to, it's up to them to prove why not, and it's up to us to believe that they can't afford to. And this is the nus of what I'm trying to get at is how can we prove they can't afford to pay it, and or how can we prove that you've got to pay it because you can afford it? Thank you.
Okay, Ashley.
Yeah, so as Darren said, what committee are being asked to do here, I think it is effectively what you've just articulated, Councillor Hammersley, but you've got a extant permission which has a Section 106, and within planning law, the applicant is able to apply to the council because there's a material change of circumstances which render them unable to pay the 106 contribution. So in terms of what's there, what isn't effectively what you're being asked. It's, is the viability, are they able to make this contribution? So that's what we're asking you to consider. So to do that assessment, what officers and what the council would do is we would either use our internal team or we'd commission an external team. In this case, we've done it internally. They undertake that assessment, so they're RICS charters, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. So they consider the applicant's submission. So what we're saying to the committee is their assessment, i.e. the council's assessment, effectively what the council have commissioned, albeit it's internal, deems that what the applicant has provided is acceptable and they're not able to make that contribution. Now, in terms of whether you agree with that or not, obviously it's within your gift to come to your own conclusion. But that's their that's their assessment.
Thank you, Ashley. I think part of the problem here for some of the members is that we would like to see how that decision has been reached. So we'd kind of like to see the working out, if you will, before we sort of, before we do the marking of the script in this case. And I think without looking at the figures, I think some people are finding it quite difficult to come to a judgment whether they can or they can't. I suspect reading the room, I can see a few nods going on around the room, that's maybe an issue. So, Councillor Hammers, I'll bring you back in.
Yes, it's exactly, because as we're sitting here at this moment in time, we have to take your word because we cannot prove or disprove the number crunch. So we can only go on what you're telling us, and I'm not sure if that perhaps seems fair. We have to make a judgment for us, which is why we're sitting here, on facts presented to us. But we have no facts because we have no numbers. So I can't assess myself whether it's affordable or not, but I can only take your word for it, and I trust every word you say in the planning office, but I can't make a judgment without knowing those facts myself, and I'm not sure if others can either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. We've been here with viability before, and we have said that maybe when we get things in terms of viability, that we get the figures to suit and we go into private session, obviously because it's commercially sensitive. So I've got concern. My main concern is going against council's policy in terms of affordable homes. I'm actually going against a policy that I agreed not so long ago to say, no affordable housing. So I couldn't support the recommendation on that alone. But I think I'd like to move that we ask for a deferral to allow us to look at the viability assessment, Chair, and I'd hope that I could get a seconder for that.
Yeah, okay. Do I have a seconder for that? So, yes, a number of hands going up. So I'll take the first one, which is Councillor Walsh. Okay, so we do have a second to that. So I will sort of go to a vote now and ask whether we would like to have a deferral. and get this sort of looked at, perhaps in private session at a later date. Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Chair, I am slightly concerned about the direction that we're taking on this in one respect, in that we aren't qualified chartered surveyors. Now, you can put numbers in front of me and I can look at them, but I don't have the professional expertise to decide whether that is viable or not. I might not like the margins which may have been built into profit elements, etc., and I probably won't like the profit elements, to be quite honest, but there are, one would presume, certain industry standards which you would have to take into account on that. At what point does my judgment supersede that of someone who is a fellow of the Royal Chartered Institute of Surveyors? That's my concern. I can ask questions about what assumptions were built into that. So, for example, looking at page 41, it would be interesting to know, as part of the workings out, whether we were looking at, in terms of viability, whether we're looking for all those 4 different ones, or whether it was modelled on accepting some or all, or a mixture of. That might be worth a deferral. Or whether we're looking at the figures as they stand in the table, or the uprated figures which it mentions in I think it's the second paragraph below that table. So which figures were actually put into the number cruncher? That may be worth a deferral to find out which one is which, and whether we're prepared to make a judgment call as to which ones we would accept and which ones not. Because I think it might be worth this committee saying, if the number crunchers come out and said, we can't afford the uprated value on all these ones here plus the affordable housing, then I think that is a legitimate use of a committee's judgment call to say which one we want. I think we need to be very specific if we are moving a deferral on what we want, because just asking for spreadsheet after spreadsheet, you'll go blind with numbers, it won't tell you anything. And the committee has been very clear on that in the past, that actually we have to be very careful how we phrase this and what deferral and what information we want. You can ask for all the information you want. You could end up printing out an agenda like that, but that's wasting officer time, our council resources. So can we be specific in what we are actually voting for and asking, please, Chair? Until someone tells me exactly what we're after, I'm not going to vote for a deferral, and I'll make a judgment call accordingly.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Yeah, valid point. I think, we are asking for a deferral, and I think, I'm happy to be guided by members here. If they want to tell us what it is they would like to find out, then we can build that in before we do a vote, so that we know exactly what those points are. Pardon? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as Councillor Wilson just articulated, that was going to be my point of committee, but you sort of moved into the voting. With due respect, you're not chartered surveyors, so I don't quite understand how you will be able to challenge those soundly if we were at an appeal, for example. It is within your gift to do the deferment, and as Councillor Wilson says, I think if you can be specific about what you're asking, and as Councillor Shepherd has articulated, that may well have to be in private. So it's not unusual for when you're dealing with viability that is in private, and quite often viability assessments won't be published because they are commercially sensitive, so we might not be able to show you everything. So just bear that in mind. So it might be coming back and we might not be able to actually publish anything in addition. It might be that you want to sort of ask the surveyor some questions if they're willing to attend.
Thank you, Ashley. Councillor Hammersley.
I can understand, like, not knowing all the details and having a wedge of papers, as Chris says, but these people are building these properties to make money. Okay, so they're not going to build it at a net even, because they won't bother. So at some stage, and I don't know how to put this to you, they're making a profit of some sort. And what they're saying is ad hoc, we don't want to pay any contributions. which are proposed in these 4 ones. So I can't believe that they're not making a profit of some sort to at least to pay some for the education or whatever's listed. They're just totally saying they're not paying any. So I cannot grasp the, because it's not my field, it's your field, if they say to us, we're going to build them and not make a penny, so we can't afford 106 money, I accept that. But I can't say that, I can't see how they're going to build it and not make a profit. Now, it's whether they say, well, we won't make our 10%, 5%, 20%, or whatever figure that company puts on their profit they want to make on these properties to not pay a bean. And that's the bit which is, it's out of my portfolio, shall I say. Thank you.
So in effect, Councillor, you would like to understand the profit margins that have effectively been put into the model and why the assessor here considers that to be appropriate. Would that be accurate?
Yes, I don't need to know how they've arrived at the profit, but there'll be a projected figure of we want to make X amount of pounds out of this project. And that's one figure I'd like to know. And I'd like them to make as much profit as they can so they can build more houses everywhere. So it's this bit of why they won't pay for anything. And I know they're not going to build these properties for nothing, for no profit.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Just one moment while they consult. Do you have any comeback at all?
So I think what we can do, if members do decide to defer, we'll put that point to the surveyors, and we'll ask the surveyors as well to provide some additional information in terms of a bit more sort of material for the committee to consider in terms of how they've come to their appraisal, and hopefully that'll give you enough to make a decision.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, we've been here before, and I don't disagree. It's not very palatable to be doing away with Section 106, especially the affordable housing element. But Councillor Wilson rather eloquently stated the case, and the fact remains that we're not chartered accountants. We can query these figures all we like, but if we refuse this application, it can go to appeal, and when that inspector looks at it, he'll look at a qualified chartered accountant's summary, which says it's not viable, and he'll look at our meeting, a bunch of people who aren't qualified to make that decision, and he'll accept the appeal, and possibly apply charges to us for refusing it. So whichever way we cut it, whether we like it or not, and I personally don't like the fact we're not getting affordable housing, the fact remains we can go down the road as far as you like, we can waste a lot of officers' time, but at the end of the day, if this goes to appeal, I guarantee 100% that the inspector will overturn our opinion if we refuse it. So I'm afraid I can't go along with any of what's been said.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to Councillor Smith's views, I think it is a balanced decision for members, and I think having that extra information will help us make that decision clearly. Thank you, Chair.
As I'm sure committee are aware, the other thing to consider is if committee decide to defer, the applicant can appeal after tonight non-determination. So it could be taken out of our hands at that point anyway. So you just have to bear that in mind. And if they do that, we then have to do additional work, obviously, in terms of defending that appeal.
Okay, Councillor Walsh.
Sorry, just a quick question. I appreciate what we're saying, and obviously time and money, and etc. And I accept what Councillor Wilson and Councillor Smith says. But when you look back at the original application, the 360/04, which was requesting for, I believe, let's have a look here, 6 houses and 9 flats. At that point, I'm assuming this is where the 106 calculations took place. And obviously, if you add up the contributions, you're talking £61,000 in contributions, plus 6 affordable housing build to include that as well. So I think what the clarity we're looking for, and as I'm not part of the committee admittedly, but it's how can we go from that amount to zero is more the point, not the fact that we're objecting to what's been said or what they're putting forward, but how can you go from such an amount that was agreed back in 2007, I think it was, to nothing today?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Walsh. I think we're sort of getting almost to an impasse if we're not careful with this. In terms of where we're going, we do have a proposal which has been sort of seconded. We have sort of had some discussion around that. I've really not said an awful lot myself, but in terms of how I feel on this, in terms of my due diligence, I feel I need to know a little bit more about this before I feel I can make a decision. Now, even if that means that then this gets pulled and it then sort of gets sent to appeal, and even if it does mean a bit of officer time, I feel that, if I'm going to make a decision, I need to have a little bit more on than just some say-so. I mean, I would like to know how they've derived this figure and how they've reached that figure. And I think other members, again, I can see a few sort of nods there, people saying that, yes, we'd like to know how they've worked this out and how we can go from that sum down to zero and, perhaps miss out a negotiations point in between to look at perhaps a reduced rate. Because, again, we are sort of setting a precedent, well, not maybe a precedent because I know this case will have come up before, but what we're doing is we're entering a territory that I don't really like because we've got lots of developments coming up. And if we do have other developers who then also try to renege on Section 106 money, and Section 106 money is obviously devaluing all the time as prices go up. So, we can't afford to lose a single penny of that Section 106 money. We need that there. And I think, we need to make sure that we are making the right decision. And so be it if we decide that we want to sort of let them off and they don't have to pay Section 106, and so be it. But I think we need to be slightly more informed on that before we can make that call, if we're going to do our job properly. So in terms of finding out things like the profit margins and the viability of it, that's something I would, if it means going into private session, then I'd be sort of more than happy to support Councillor Shepherd's motion tonight based on that. Do I have any other speakers before we go to that vote? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I think we must be very, very specific in what we're asking. Just saying we don't trust the numbers, in my view, isn't a good enough reason for deferral. We need to act, unless people are willing to accept that we need to actually ask officers to go away to the value and say, right, what is the point of no return where it becomes unsustainable? So is it 6 units of affordable housing? Is that our limit? Or is it, they say, we could give you 4 units of affordable housing, or is it 5? Or do we have the 6 plus play and open space, or 4 plus education? I think we're entering very dangerous territory here, Chair, because we aren't qualified to make these sorts of negotiations. But I think if we are making a deferral, we need to make sure we are exceptionally specific in what we're asking for, not just saying go away and show us the numbers, because we won't even necessarily understand the numbers. We need to know what the outcome of those numbers is, and is it a blanket no, or is it you can have this, this and this, you as a committee now need to prioritise what you want. And I think that's what, if the committee is prepared to accept that, but I don't know whether officers are actually capable of doing that. That's another thing. Whether we actually have the officer capacity to do that, or whether we have to go to the district valuer's office to look at that. I think it's, I think in some respects we're bordering on playing God here. And that's not what we're qualified to do as a planning committee. But can we please make sure that if it is a deferral, I suspect the committee's mood is to go for a deferral, but please be exceptionally specific in what you're asking for. Otherwise, the deferral is a waste of time and officer money. I want to make sure that it is actually meets a purpose.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. I think there's some very, very valid points there that we need to take on board before we do this vote. So I would ask, you know, what is it that we want from that deferral? Okay, so if we do go down that road, you know, what are the conditions? What is it that we want to find out specifically? And then obviously we need to consult officers to make sure that is achievable and doable. Okay, so again, I would like to ask you, as the members, what it is you would like to know. So can you steer this committee? Councillor Cape.
I did open up this can of worms, so I do kind of apologise, but I don't, because in the training that we did for this, I totally understand that we have to have a good reason not to take the recommendations that are made by the professionals. However, I was also told that our responsibility was to apply reasonableness to the decision, and it's that what we're there to do. As the figures actually sit on the table in front of me, I wouldn't be able to apply that reasonable deduction, because at the back of my head is going around, well, okay, these figures are based in 2005. To echo what was said to my left, there's a whole paragraph about why they can index it, but they're a financial company. They do indexation and cost cash flow levels the whole time. There's just a blanket statement saying that it would need further work on indexation to bring it up to date, and so therefore we're not doing it, and it's not viable. And I'm going, how can I apply reasonable thought to that? Because I can't. There is nothing there for me to base reasonableness on other than the statements of the chartered surveyors. And if that's the case, how can I make a decision on anything? If all I'm going to say is, you know, we can't query it because it'll be deferred. You know, they will challenge the fact that we couldn't make a decision. But how can I make a reasonable decision on that based in front of me? It's a leap of faith, which unfortunately I'm not prepared to make.
Thank you, councillors and chair. So don't, from a professional point of view, I don't agree with where the debate is moving, because I think we've articulated this already. I don't think you're in a position, a professional position, to be able to counter the outputs from the RIC surveyor, the valuer. However, if you're moving to a deferment, I mean, in essence, you've got policy HS1, which is articulated within the report. So I think it's page 40 of your report. So within that policy, it basically says, where this is considered viable, then the applicant should provide clear evidence to demonstrate this. So in effect, you are indicating that you cannot make an assessment on that evidence. That isn't technically your role, that's for the valuer to do. That said, what you're saying is you need some more information to be confident to make your decision. So I've had a chat with my colleague Darren, and we've come up with, based on the discussion so far, we've come up with some suggested wording, which Darren, are you happy to relay?
So I made some notes while the debate was going on, so but please do add anything in if you feel that I've missed something. The reason I would get is that defer the application for a future committee to allow it to be conducted in a private session. I think that's important. To understand the profit margins and background info, and to how the viability appraisal was set up, and to understand the point at which the scheme becomes unviable.
Okay, so thoughts on what you've just heard, Councillor Shepherd?
Yeah, I'm happy with what Darren said. I think it covers most of the points that we've raised ourselves, and I'll ask that we move to the vote.
Can I just confirm, Councillor Shepherd, that is the proposal that you wish to put forward? Okay, so that's coming from Councillor. Do I still have a seconder for that? Yeah, so Councillor Walsh. Okay, so in that case, I will move to a vote. So as just read out by Darren, All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Can I just check with officers that when we're looking at the point of non-viability, will they be looking at what Section 106 contributions it could sustain before it becomes unviable? Because I think the committee, if I'm picking up the committee's temperature correctly, the issue seems to be particularly around affordable housing. So would it be appropriate for the committee to give a steer to officers and say, we would like you to, in the deferral, to focus on the affordable housing and how many affordable houses we can get before it becomes non-viable? Because I don't want to set officers off doing a load of work for no reason, but if the purpose of the committee is we're especially focused on the affordable housing, that enables officers to focus down on that and then say, right, tell us whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whether it's house number 6, which tips it over the line, and then we might consider what our options are from there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. As I kind of understood it, I would have thought that some of that would have been implied within what we've just asked. I don't know whether I've misunderstood that, but I kind of...
But there are other conditions, there are other 106s in there,
yeah.
Chair, so I'm trying to narrow it down to the one which the committee is particularly hard and fast on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, so thank you. So we'll go to the vote then. So all those in favour? Okay, and that is unanimous. Okay, thank you. That is our last item of business tonight, so I shall now adjourn this meeting. Before I do that, I'd just like to thank our officers for their time and also members for their work on these two matters tonight. Thank you very much. This meeting is now adjourned.